Hi everyone, and welcome. I'm Sarah Freeman, the Director of Exhibitions at Brattleboro Museum and Art Center, and it's my pleasure to present tonight's Artist Talk with Daniel Callahan. As you know, when you came in, admission for this program is pay as you wish, and if you would like to donate to Brattleboro Museum and Art Center to support this and future arts programs, you can do so here at the front desk or at brattleboromuseum.org/support. You'll also find information about membership on that page. So this event is presented in connection with the exhibit that we're all in right now, Daniel Callahan and Mask, which is on view through June 11th. In tonight's program, Daniel will discuss the exhibit and his artistic process. And if you're joining us by Zoom or Facebook Live, you're welcome to ask questions at any time, and we'll save time at the end of the talk for questions. To submit a question or comment, if you're here via Zoom, please use the Q&A button on your screen. And if you're watching on Facebook, you can type your questions or comments there, and we'll keep an eye on that too. So that's some kind of online housekeeping. I hope everyone who's here in person can hear me okay. Is that good? And that means you'll probably be able to hear Daniel just fine too. So I'm going to introduce Daniel. Daniel Callahan is a multimedia artist, filmmaker, and designer, merging a legion of disciplines, including painting, digital photography, film, music, writing, and performance. Daniel works to craft immersive experiences incorporating story, ritual, and the human form to explore aspects of resilience and mysticism. Best known for his painterly technique of masking, a ritual painting of the face used to reveal rather than conceal one's inner essence, Daniel and his work have been featured at the Museum of Fine Arts, the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, the Institute of Contemporary Art, there's so many, the New Orleans Museum of Art, and the Queens Museum, as well as in publications such as the Believer magazine, the Bay State Banner, and Words, Beats, and Life, the Global Journal of Hip Hop Culture. We're thrilled to have Daniel joining us tonight for this presentation and thrilled to have his work here at the museum. So please join me in welcoming Daniel Callahan. All right, thank you. Let's turn this off.
Yeah, right. All right, thank you so much for that lovely introduction, and I appreciate everyone for coming out. I know we have really nice weather, and so I know the competition is high, but I appreciate you all coming out, and especially folks online, appreciate you for tuning in as well. So, I'm going to try to keep my remarks short because I really respond better to interactions with people instead of lecturing. So I'll sort of give some context around the show, and then we can just talk with each other, if that's cool with you all. Okay, so who am I? It's a great question, and it's actually been a central question to my practice. When you ask somebody who they are, it can be intimidating, but it's also a really powerful invitation for someone to think deeper. We often start by giving our names, right? I'm Daniel. We also start talking about what we do, right? I'm a professor, I'm an artist. But we're not human doings, we're human beings, is what I like to think of it. And so, you know, finding out who we be is a totally separate conversation, and it's one that's really sort of driven my art practice. And so I'm going to talk pretty much exclusively about the mask work, because that's what's here on view in this installation. But as Sarah was saying, I do a lot of different stuff. I came up, a little bit about who I am. I came up in the 80s and really was sort of in the nexus of Reaganomics and hip hop, which is like this beautiful like wellspring of culture and this like oppressive kind of, you know, grind down on community. And you mix in there like, you know, the crack epidemic and the war on drugs. And it was just a very, it was a time full of contrast. And with hip hop culture, I'm not sure if there are any, you know, major hip hoppers in the room, so I may be, you know, telling you things you already know, but just to give you an overview, hip hop started as more than just a music genre. It started as a cultural movement. And in that cultural movement, there were 5 sort of original elements, which were graffiti art, which was the visual element, break dancing, which was sort of the dance element, beatboxing, which was creating rhythms with your mouth and your body. There was also emceeing, which is sort of rapping, as you would say, or controlling the crowd. And then you had, I always forget the 5th one. So beatboxing, graffiti, DJing, which is the one that I forgot. DJing, which is using technology to find break beats in music so that people can dance to it at a party. And so those 5 were sort of the original core elements, and what's interesting is they map almost perfectly to the sort of 4 modalities of learning, right? When you think of audio-visual and you think of kinesthetic. And so it was a way for folks, we're in a time when the education system was really being repressed, to actually create activities for themselves to learn, grow. And that's really affected my work because I've never thought of art as being siloed. I've always thought of, in hip hop, you do it all, so you MC, but you also do graffiti, and perhaps you can also DJ, and you also join the break dancers when they break dance. And so it was always this, you immerse yourself into all the different genres and all the different disciplines, and that's sort of natural. That's kind of in the realm of things. And so that's how I've approached my art career. And so while you'll see in this exhibition, you'll see mainly photography, but in that photography is a bit of performance art, is a bit of sort of interpersonal dialogue and exchange, is photography, and there are definitely videos that I've done through this work as well. And so it's very much a mixture of many things. But to get to the masking, so you already kind of heard my pitch in the introduction. Wow. That with a mask, we think of things that we cover our face. Maybe I should just let that pass. I don't know how long it might take a while. Maybe I can time it to be like in and out. Yeah. A little break beat, yeah, for sure. Okay, I think it's maybe settled down. We'll see. But so in terms of the origin of this masking, like I said, the sort of idea of a mask is something that we use to hide our identity, or something that we hide behind, or assume the identity of another, right? We think of Halloween, putting on masks, becoming something else. What I try to do is not to conceal, but to reveal, to sort of flip the notion of what a mask is. And it's not new. It's very much based on indigenous practices of body decoration, which we found like all over the world, especially in the continent of Africa. But literally indigenous cultures from all over the world have these traditions of body decoration, and I became fascinated with them as I've worked in this, in masking, and I've done some research around them. And obviously every people has their own traditions, has their own reasons for doing this, but there are some commonalities that really unite them. And one of those commonalities is change. These sort of rituals are often done when someone is having a drastic change in their life. Either they're changing from being a boy to a man, or they're changing from being single to being married, or they're changing from being a farmer to a warrior. These major life changes are often preceded by these rituals where folks can literally change the way they look. And the power of being able to change the way you look is that not only you see yourself differently, but the world sees you differently. And so it's a wonderful way to sort of bring you into a new phase of life by changing your actual visage, what you actually look like. And so what I've done is, in my work, is I've never tried to copy anything that I've sort of seen, but I have tried to match the intention that is put into the work from other peoples who've really been doing this since the beginning of time. It's said that the first, before we were painting on walls and caves, we were painting on ourselves. And so we actually are our first canvases. And when you use the human face as a canvas, it invites interaction. You can't approach my work without looking at another human being. And that they're looking back oftentimes is engaging you. And when I mask other people, it is very much about that engagement. It should be a representation of not only that person, or at least what I've gained from that person, but also the sort of interaction that we have. And so there are three sort of core concepts to masking. The first is identity, mainly because I use the human face, and that's pretty much our identification package, right? This is what we look at to understand who we are. Communion, in that it is a communal artwork. Even when I was masking myself, I would share this with other people and start dialogues around that. And also the process of masking is really about me not only looking within, but looking without, and trying to build a connection between those two different things. So communion is a big aspect. And then the other one I mentioned earlier is change. I never do the same mask twice. It's always supposed to be sort of a representation of where someone is in the moment that the mask is created. And in order to find that, there are several questions that I ask myself when I was masking myself, and several questions that I ask other people to really kind of get to know where they are. I'll never, in one sitting, you're never going to find out who someone like fully is, but what you can do is find out sort of where they are and try to represent that. The designs that come are rarely a one-to-one correlation with anything that is said. It's much more sort of a expression of the energy that's being exchanged. And oftentimes the designs are above my own sort of comprehension. I just see them and I start to draw them, sketch them out, and then start to paint them. So oftentimes I'm at a loss as to what exactly they mean, but when I'm in looking at them, it's right. Something just feels right about it. And thankfully, fortunately, everyone who I've masked has felt the same way, that I've somehow captured something, and when they look at themselves, they see something new about themselves that they appreciate. The other thing is, along with the ritual of painting, is the ritual of taking the mask off, which is just as important. Again, because these are supposed to be representative of the moment, once that ritual has been completed, you wash it off and you return to yourself. And hopefully with sort of a newfound understanding or appreciation. And in the process of doing these, people become art. So it changes the way that hopefully that we look at each other. We may treat each other differently if we thought each other as precious works of art. So I could talk probably for the rest of the evening about this, but given that context, the last thing I should say before I would like to open it up is this particular installation is a really important sort of pivotal moment, or it expresses a pivotal moment in my mask work where I transitioned from it being sort of a personal project of mine where I was using my own face to opening it up to my community and masking other people. And so the first iteration was called Month of the Mask, where I used my face as a canvas, and every day for an entire month I created a new mask. And it was very much like a month-long meditation. And that was like a watershed for me personally, professionally. I learned a great deal. And then I opened it up to my community, and I started to mask family members, friends, just chance acquaintances. And that sort of blossomed into an incredible way for me to bring a personal art form to the public. And then that has blossomed into opportunities to hold masking workshops, which I'll be doing tomorrow here. And I've been doing, really all over the country. And that has been a way for me to engage other people and bring them into this practice and allow them to do it themselves. And then finally, it's culminated into a large event called the Masquerade Ball, which I've put on with Castle of Our Skins, which is a music and education organization, and Ash, who is current director of that organization, is here, so I just wanted to shout her out. But we put on this giant, I guess you would call it a day of appreciation, where we had folks of different cultures and ethnicities and traditions come together to share what makes them unique, but also we can be unified in our appreciation of each other. Because this is based on a practice that is practiced all around the world, I've realized it's become an incredible platform for cross-cultural exchange. And the more I learn about other cultures, the more cultures can learn about me, and there's this beautiful sort of synergy that happens. And so this past mask ball that we did in July had a whole host of performances and exhibitions. We had Brazilian capoeira, and we had Japanese taiko drumming, we had hip hop dance, we had spoken word, we had African fashion design, we had Nipmuc artists who erected sculptures in the park, as well as led dance routines, and many, many more. And it was just an incredible sort of moment of, okay, this is what the world could look like if we all saw each other as works of art, and we saw our cultures as works of art, and we came together to celebrate that. And just imagine what we could do if that was sort of the way that we approached everything. And it was, yeah, it was a little slice of heaven, I think, for, for a couple hours. So that's how the work has really kind of expanded, and it continues to expand. I love seeing the masks that people are coming up with in the exhibition. There's a little sort of table that was set up, and seeing people sort of engage in this themselves, and then I'll be so happy to see how we do tomorrow as well. But yeah, that's sort of the practice in a nutshell. And I think after the question and answer, I can certainly walk around and show you all sort of the story behind each of these. The beautiful thing is that each of these people are people, and so they have stories and they have attachments, and I can talk a little bit about that. But I really wanted to sort of open it up and see what you all thought, because this is, I think I'll end there. That's okay. Oh, we got two.
Just like the time.
Okay, you may need to repeat the question for those on Zoom, but as a practice of body decoration that's shared by many, many cultures, and one that you have used to be able to engage with a variety of people across ages and cultures and things, I wonder if you can talk about the receptivity. Have people, despite ages, despite cultural differences, despite geographical locations, have they been as open as you would have thought? Have there been any hesitations in engaging with this, or anything you could share around
Sure.
perception?
Sure. So the question was, in opening this practice up to people of all different walks of life, what has the reception been like, and what's been the sort of range? And so, yeah, I mean, I think I started doing these things with youth, actually. And I'm really glad I did, because youth, especially teenagers, are involved in so much change, and they're trying to find themselves, and they're always looking for communities to connect with. And so like they represent the three core concepts very well. And so in working with youth, I found that they've been very receptive and very open. There were always a few who are, I guess, I want to say wary, but kind of incredulous, and wondering, kind of not sure if they want to be that vulnerable. And some have makeup on they don't want to ruin, so like there's that. And I get it, because I know how much time was put into making that right, so, but the beauty is, often by the end of the workshop, everybody is engaged with it, and everyone is appreciative of it. So, I think, and I've also worked with adults as well, which has been awesome too. And I think that, yeah, for the most part, people have been really open and receptive. I think rarely people get a chance to do some introspection, to look at themselves in different ways, to see other people in different ways, and to share a little bit about themselves in a safe space. And so I try to create that in these masking workshops, and people are generally really happy and receptive about that. Curtis, yes.
I have two questions.
Okay.
So the first is, to what extent, for that 1 month that you were immersed in masking, Were you conscious of sort of cycles of the moon or the sun or the flow of energy from the earth? Did that have any, or to what extent did that have an impact on your start date and your ending date?
That's a great question. It was really sort of an experiment. So going into it, I knew I was going to do it for a month, and I was going to do it every day. And that was just a commitment I made to myself. And once I got into that rhythm, yeah, it really did end up becoming like a spiritual experience for me, for sure. I would wake up, and this would be all I did for the whole day. And then I would go to sleep, and then wake up the next day, and
But the start date was arbitrary.
The start date was, I guess it's arbitrary in my mind, but like looking back on it, it made a lot of sense. So I should give a little context around how I started it. When I was originally, I went to California after graduating from college, and I went there to pursue a music career, and that was really going to be the crux of what I did. And I went out to California, I did that for a while, and got kind of burnt out. And so then I returned home, and I didn't really know what to do with myself, because I had told myself this is who I was and who I was going to be. And now I didn't know who I was. And so I had to ask myself these questions. And that process was when I started to mask. It wasn't the first time that I masked, though. In California was actually when I was introduced to this practice. I was basically with a large group of artists, and we wanted to hold like a party. And we wanted to hold sort of a gala or a ball, but we didn't want to do the masquerade thing when people came with masks on. So we decided we would paint the mask instead. And that's what led us to sort of start looking at all these different cultures and seeing the cultural resonance of this. And so I started there in California, and then when I came back home, I was really missing the community that we had created in California, and I was lost. I didn't know what I was doing, and definitely was feeling, anxiety, depression, you name it, just sort of spiraling. And this practice really became a therapy for me. And so when I masked and realized that it would calm me, it would allow me to sort of zone in, it would allow me to express myself in ways when I couldn't express myself in music anymore. It was really sort of a lifeline. And so I knew that I wanted to do this a lot, and so I said, well, you know what? Why don't I just, for a whole month, do this and just see what happens? And so in a way, it made a lot of sense in a cosmic way, but it wasn't something that I had pre-planned on doing. Yeah.
You have a follow-up question? Was that, was someone else?
I'll come back to you, Curtis. I'll come back to you. Yes, I said yes.
I have a question on your mask design process with another party. When you're approaching another party to do their form, you mentioned that there's not necessarily words exchange. How do you come to a design? That's a mystery to me, and it's awesome. And how do you get there?
Yes, absolutely. It's a mystery to me too. But there's a process. There's a process to it, and the process is I sit down and talk with this person, and I have a really engaged conversation. And I first am very transparent, open, and vulnerable with them. And by doing that, I create a safe space for them to be vulnerable with me. And I just ask questions, and I hear them talk. And the beautiful thing is that people really do like to talk about themselves when given the option, right? And while they're talking, I can look at them for a very long period of time and not have it be awkward. And so I'm just looking at their face as they talk, and I just start seeing patterns or colors or shapes, and I start just sketching them as I talk. And at some point in time, I get a design that kind of makes sense, and then I start to mask. The beauty of it too is I'm a big fan of I guess putting the ego to the side in a way. So I find that processes that remove my sort of analytic mind are really helpful when I'm doing art. And so there may be some analytical sort of analysis happening while I'm creating the design, but once I actually start to paint that on someone's face, it completely changes. and it becomes something else. And by the end, it's this thing that's very much a collaboration with the person's physiognomy, and the person's story and vibe, and this moment that can never actually be recreated, and whatever I bring to it, which is usually just being open and sort of empty of kind of expectation. And something is created. And I think I really like the work because I feel like it's been more than just me creating it. It allows me to be less, I think, critical. Yeah. Sure.
So to kind of dig a little deeper into that, I'm also really laser focused on questions about this process, because it's starting to feel, as you're talking, like there's kind of like two different practices that you're engaging in. One is in relationship with yourself and the kind of inner dialogue or journey that you're on as you were doing your month-long process, or even another iteration of that, seems really different than working in kind of a spiritual collaboration with somebody else, where you're taking on more of a priestly role. You're interpreting. That's kind of what it feels like. You're kind of like becoming a channel. You're interpreting for them. Do you and that feels like a complementary practice. Do you think of it in those terms? I mean, obviously one flows into the other, but they sound like two modalities to me. Do you agree?
I do, and I think there's also another way of looking at it too. So I do agree, and I think that when I sit down to mask myself, it is different. I often take longer when I mask myself, because I don't have to worry about wasting someone else's time, and I just, and to me it's therapeutic, so, I could stay there forever, so in a way they're very different. However, in a way they're very similar, and I think the way that they're similar, so there's this saying, right? Descartes has this saying, "I think, therefore I am," which is very much like, the idea of the analytical mind is tied to us existing in the world, our consciousness, right? But there's this other concept, this South African concept called Ubuntu, which is I am because we are. And that, to me, is the crux of my practice, that the deeper I go into myself, the more I feel connected to everyone else, and the more opportunities for me to connect to everyone else are open. And so in that way, when I'm masking somebody else, I'm still masking myself in a way. And when I'm masking myself and sharing with other people, they see themselves in a weird way too. And again, another thing that I can't fully explain, but I think that's how they're similar in my mind.
That's really cool. I work in theater, and so I dress people and costume them, and I can totally vibe on that collaborative way of working towards a result.
Yeah, and mask work is so powerful. I say that these are not like masks, mainly because they're not, but they're not to say that masks are not powerful either, and not incredible tools for transformation and change. And what they do, they allow you to is to find new parts of yourself that you didn't even know existed through these masks, and they bring those things out too. So yeah, all very, very cool stuff. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I'm wondering about the kind of self-reflection or self-questioning process that you did, and how I feel like there's so many pitfalls there, because it really relies on you being very honest with yourself when you're responding to your own questions, and not just kind of, if you're not going into it with an image in your head of what you want to make, I don't know, it's just like it's such a kind of frightening and exciting place of possibility, but Like, do you ever, or did you ever, when you were, first starting out, like, did you ever feel like you were being pulled down a direction where you're like, oh, I kind of know what I want things to look
Totally.
like?
Yeah, and I mean, like a lot of the pieces of me, there's premeditation. Like I don't just sit down and create this. Like, like I definitely have, but yeah, there's a lot more premeditation when it's me because I get to sit with my thoughts for as long as I want, right? Like, and in that way, it is again a little different because oftentimes with myself, there's something that I want to express before I even start, and then in the process, it changes and it, morphs, but there is that impetus. Whereas with other people, I don't start with any impetus at all. And then, through the process, it kind of reveals itself. So that's definitely another difference between those practices. But yeah, totally. And sometimes it is fraught. I mean, I think the lesser successful pieces are pieces where I've really tried to stick to something, Yeah.
Yeah, and there were a couple things that you've said, and what triggered it initially was talking about ancient cultures around the globe and the importance of painting. Has the thought crossed your mind about painting a body as well as a mask to evoke, to create community, to reach the thing that you're wanting to express? Has that been something you've considered?
It has. I've sort of considered it, but it's never been a serious consideration. And I think there's several reasons for that. Some of them are really practical. One is just that like to paint a whole body is a lot more of a time commitment. And also, especially in like here in America in the West, body painting has always been sort of overly sensualized, where it becomes a sexual kind of thing. And that just doesn't really vibe with what I'm trying to go for. But I do think it would be interesting to expand it. But I've had so much fun with this section because, it's like, this is really the epicenter. It's like all of our sensors are here, our hearing, our eyes, our taste, our tongue, our mind, our brain. And then the idea of, the face, it's like, I think there's over 43 muscles in the face, and they can create over like 10,000 expressions. And, you look to the face for so much information about how someone's feeling, what someone's thinking, if they're healthy or not, if they're familiar or not. And we've coded so much information here that it's been fun to just decode that. I think I haven't explored all of this yet. But who knows? Maybe in the future I'll end up doing full bodies. Yeah. Yes, and then I see you.
I have an almost embarrassing thing because I feel like I may have missed something. May
Okay.
I ask this obvious, ridiculous question? That would be back there, but over here, what we're seeing, are these in fact your photo or your creations of which people have done their own mask? They're the ones that initiated, and they came up with the designs, and you have somehow put it over here, whether, I can't tell from here if it's a canvas or a photo, or are you the person that created their mask just by interacting with them?
It's a great question, yeah.
And it's almost ridiculously embarrassing.
No, it's a good clarifying question.
This is the most crucial thing. Did these guys create their own? Did you play as like the art therapist and you just hung out with them? Bang!
Yeah, no, for sure. And I should be asking these questions, re-asking these questions for the Zoom audience. So I'll re-ask your question as well. So you asked whether these images of folks are them creating their own mask or me masking them.
Yes.
And the answer is, for everything in terms of everything that's been photographed, these are works that I've created on someone else's face, using someone else's face. However, there is a video that plays over on that wall where you see mainly youth looking into the camera. It's a video piece. And most of those are masks that they created themselves on their own faces, yeah.
There's no question on that one. That did not require a PhD.
Oh wow, yeah, they're going to turn it, thank you, appreciate it. They're going to turn on the video so that we can, when we do our sort of tour, you can see that. Yeah. Yeah, you had a question.
Yes, you said that you like to work with young people, or they mostly worked with young people. And I just wondered what the difference is, like working with young people and working with older people. Do older people, is it harder? Is it easier? Is it, I mean, like as we get older, we have more in our faces. And,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's harder or easier, and honestly, I don't know if it's that different. I worked with youth mainly because of my access to them. I've always worked with youth. I'm an educator. I have a background in education, and have always worked with youth in the arts. And so that was a natural kind of extension for me to go to the people I know. And so, but with adults, and I think I've been lucky because most of the population that I've done this with have been self-selecting. Like, they're there because they want to try something new. If I would kind of go to strangers and try to pitch this to them, I imagine they get a lot more like, whoa, I don't know, because it's like, you don't do this every day, right? It's different, and then you have to talk to somebody and be vulnerable. It's a lot, and so for adults who are self-selecting, I find they're just as open and just as excited about going through that process. Sometimes, the artist in them has been stamped down so much with time that, they find it difficult maybe to engage fully or find it difficult to start. We really do a number on our creative impulses as we grow older. But I think once the child in them, is resurrected and it's like, oh, this is time for me to, play. I think it's the same for adults as it is youth.
That must be a joy.
Yeah, it's really nice. It's really nice to see people find things and often the quietest one is the one who does the most elaborate mask and everyone's like, in awe of that, and it's really cool. It's very cool, yeah. Yeah. Sure.
So, what is the antithesis of masking? And the process that you brought to fore.
The antithesis of masking. I mean, I think it is the sort of, well, again, this is about revealing. So I think when we hide ourselves behind walls for whatever reason, sometimes they're good reasons, sometimes it's because we've been hurt before, or we don't feel like we can trust. But I think when we put walls up between us and other people that then don't allow them to see who you truly are, both parties lose. And the more you do that, the less you even remember who you are. And you can get to a point where you don't know who you are, and you're a mystery even to yourself. And I should say that we're all mysteries to ourselves. I ask myself the question of who am I all the time, and I still haven't found an adequate answer. But I know, how do I say this? I know the ground from which I know the ground of who I am. And that idea of Ubuntu is really important to me too, because I know from whence I've come and the connections I have in this world, and the experiences I've had, and having reflected on those experiences, I've done a lot of work to find out who I am. And when you don't do that work, it becomes very hard to connect with other people and to even connect with yourself. So the antithesis, is it's interesting because it's like a safety, it's a dangerous safety to not reveal yourself to the world, to hide yourself, to conceal yourself. And it's dangerous because, you know, again, in a world without trust, then everyone is in danger, you know? So I think that would be sort of the antithesis. Yeah, sure.
So after you've worked on these individuals, I'm curious to know what they have communicated to you after the process is over. Because I imagine there's this moment when you're wondering, you know, have they been sort of watching the clock go by, waiting to bolt, or have they really, really relished this experience and they want to tell you about it? So I would imagine you've got some wonderful stories.
Yeah, I mean, again, because there's a lot of self-selection, thankfully I haven't had people, at least who haven't shown or expressed to me that they haven't enjoyed the experience, you know, like, but yeah, I mean, each one has been different and each response has been different, but I do, as part of the process, I do tell people that I'd like for you not to look until it's done. You know, so the whole time you don't know what's being done, really. And again, it's that trust. And so to go from what you know you look like, that you've seen every day, to then seeing yourself with all these different colors and shapes and things, and you know, your physical presence, your physical appearance has changed so dramatically. It's a lot, you know, and people have to take a moment and really kind of look at themselves, you know, and it's just like, there's sort of this awe, which I find really beautiful, because I know it's not just that I'm a great artist, it's that they're seeing themselves differently for the first time in a way they've never seen themselves before, you know, like, and that's just really amazing. And so there's that moment, and then as they look, they start to see things, and they, you know, they'll ask questions, oh, like, does this mean this? And I'm like, if it means that to you, that's what it is, you know? But yeah, I mean, and I can look at some of these, I guess, as examples. I mean, when I masked my mother, so at the far left here, that's my mother. And, you know, she wrote like 3 or 4 pages after the experience just about what she learned from it. And for her, it was very much about waiting on things instead of waiting for things, meaning as she was being masked, she had this idea of wanting to anticipate what it is and waiting for the end, the reveal. But through the process, because it's a long process, she had to kind of like shed that. And she just ended up being like, I'm just going to wait on this experience, i.e., I'm going to be fully present for it and just be in the moment and receive what I'm receiving in the moment. And that was a sort of a big change for her. But yeah, each mask has a different kind of story attached to it in terms of people's response, but it's usually a moment of just like, whoa, you know? Yeah.
Do you feel like your mother carried that on? I mean, that moment, she embraced that and did it perpetuate?
I hope so, you know, yeah, I hope so. It was definitely meaningful for her. Yeah. Yes, and are there, should I be taking questions from the online audience if there are?
Heads up if there are some questions.
We do have a couple questions.
You do, okay. And then I'll come back to the room.
Okay, so the quick question we have is, have you done workshops with the incarcerated and what was the outcome?
I have not worked with the incarcerated population. The question was, have I worked with an incarcerated population? I have not, and I would love to. I have not, simply just because I don't have direct connection to populations, but I would be completely open to that.
So the second question we have is, will you have a mask ball this year?
Yeah, so we will not be having a mask ball this year. Mask ball 22 2022 was basically a 5-year project that we had to organize over, about 5 years, because we were going to do it in 2020, and then the pandemic hit. So, we had to pivot, and we were going to do it indoors, and so we had to completely pivot, and that's what brought us outdoors, which is so perfect, because we couldn't have picked a better place than that, But yeah, it took us a while to plan that, so we won't be having one in 2023, but we're hoping to do something in 2025.
The third question is, where is your home base, and why does one mask?
Why does one mask? Oh, wow, okay. My home base right now is Boston, specifically Jamaica Plain. I have lived for, I guess, the majority of my time that I've been back in Boston in Roxbury. And Roxbury is where I started masking, and so Roxbury always has a very special place in my heart. But I'm currently in Jamaica Plain. And why does one mask? I wish I had a little bit more context, i.e., why does one do this particular thing, or why does one engage in sort of the body decoration practice that's been practiced since the beginning of time? And that answer I don't have. However, I think what I have that could perhaps answer both or give a thought towards both is I think that we're all striving to understand who we are, and we've all been given this human form that we exist in. And we know, I think in the bottom of all of our hearts, we know that that's not all that we are. We're more than just this body. And we're trying to understand what it is that we are. And I think being able to engage this body in a creative way allows you to practice sort of, whether you want to call it divine or you want to call it evolutionary, this process of creation and recreation. We were all created, and we all exist in this world that has been created. And by engaging in this way, we get to kind of have a conversation with that divine creation, or that awesome creation, however you want to describe it. And I think that's really important, and probably why we've been doing it for so long. Maybe I should go back to the room. Yeah? Okay, cool. Yes?
I wanted to maybe press you a bit on this sort of self-therapy that you talked about, especially with the mask. Engaging with others, knowing that it is a deeply reflective process, so it is therapeutic in that sense. But knowing you, and knowing that you have engaged sort of with the understanding that this is a therapy, for instance, working with a psychologist and sort of talking about the therapeutic aspects of masking, and working with people who were homicide survivors, etc. Wondered if you could elaborate a little bit more on sort of the overt therapeutic aspects and how you've engaged, how you've shared that, and potentially with whom, without giving names, but in other spaces where you can see masking being a benefit in a therapeutic way.
Sure, yes. So in talking with an actual therapist and psychologist, it's important for me to say that this is not a therapy, but it is a potential intervention, and it is also a potential, I guess, sort of ancillary, or what is the word? It's a practice that could be used that may have therapeutic benefit. Mainly because, I never want someone to think that by being masked it's going to solve any kind of problem that they have. I'm not that good. But I have worked with violence survivors. I have worked with folks who are experiencing grief, folks who are experiencing sickness, and that has been really rewarding. for the same reason why it's rewarding for everyone else, but I think there's a sort of deeper resonance. I'm thinking of one piece where I masked an anti-violence activist, and she had lost 6 members of her family to street violence. And, you know, her son was killed, and she went to the court and forgave the person who killed her son and has had a relationship with that person. I mean, like, this woman is just, it's like, just, I was blown away by her story. And being able to then use this as a way to sort of like pay tribute to her was really special. And that she was willing to tell me her story was really special for both of us. And I think I learned probably more in that interaction than she did. And what I learned was just the power of forgiveness. And that, you know, when you forgive somebody, you free yourself as much as you free that other person. And yeah, that was really heavy, you know, because she has every right to be bitter. She has every right to be angry. She has every right to be, you know, even hateful, but she has found a way to not be. And I think one thing that I'm really fascinated with is human resilience, how we deal with struggle, how we deal with trauma, how we continue to live fulfilled lives even when bad things have happened to us. And that is something that I continue to learn through this process. So,
how did she respond when she first saw her masked self?
She's so sweet. She just had this incredible smile, and she just kept smiling, and she, you know, she's Cape Verdean. She speaks pretty good English, but I think what she wanted to tell me was hard for her to say in English. But she was just smiling, and she was laughing, and she was smiling, and she was crying, and she was laughing, and it was beautiful. Another person who I'll say really quickly, my mother's a pediatrician, and she would take trips to South Africa to give these clinics at these basically squatter encampments. And you know, during the 90s, there was a really terrible AIDS epidemic in South Africa, and it left a lot of youth without parents. And so alongside one of these sort of squatter encampments, there have been missionaries, well, I shouldn't say missionaries, they're Christian South Africans who are from the area who have found, I guess, mothers to come and mother these children. And I was able to mask one of those mothers. And that was another moment of just like, you know, just feeling very honored to be able to do that, and honored to see that they were honored by me honoring them. And yeah, very, very tearful, beautiful kind of moment for that. So it's been some really memorable sessions.
I have another question.
Sure.
I'm interested in what the difference is when you're masking someone that you know and someone that you have just met, and then like what, you know, it's such an intimate experience, and I imagine that you're learning so much about the people that you already know, and just like what's that experience like?
Yeah. Again, it's very different, but also very similar. The similarity is that for most people, this is an intimate conversation. You know, even for people I know really well, you know, yeah, I mean, I haven't masked all my family members, and I imagine each one will be, you know, even though I've known them for my whole life, it'll be interesting, you know, because it's, there is a certain level of intimacy in this that's not, I should say, not like normal every day, you know? So, and that way it's the same for everybody. And I think, but I do think like folks who I'm not as familiar with, it's probably a little easier, you know? There's less to protect. But yeah, it's pretty similar for everybody.
I didn't have a question, just as a comment.
Sure.
It sounds like a Zen-y thing. It just struck me earlier that by you masking or helping folks mask, you're actually, in a paradoxical way, helping them unmask their guardedness, which unfortunately adults, it's not just regional in New England and Britain, but which are even more guarded versus the South or other places in the country. You're helping people unmask, and the default I fear with adults, even though I've been one for 66 years, is at least at the beginning is guardedness. Forget about the era we're living since, let's say, 2016. It has always been, I think, with adults, as they kind of close down a bit. Regionally, it's worse in some places than others. But it's a beautiful thing. It's what art does in some way. But you should commend yourself in that sense.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
It's a little magic in some way.
Yeah. I appreciate that for sure. Yeah. I learned that mask, the word mask is in Latin is persona, and when you think of a persona as the role you play in society, before anyone knows anything about me, they will see a black man, right? And we know all the connotations around that, all the implications around that. I identify as a black man, so that is part of who I am. But that mask gets heavy every once in a while, with all of us, regardless of who you identify as, there's heaviness to that, and it's not all that you are. And when you feel like you can't take that mask off anywhere, it does become sort of like a prison in a way. Which reminds me of Poem for Nina, which is a poem by Nikki Giovanni. And Ash is laughing because Ash put me onto this poem. This is the impetus of her organization's name, which is Castle of Our Skins. And the poem for Nina says, we're all what is it? We're all
imprisoned in the castle of our skins, and some of us have said, so be it. Let my skin be a castle, and to paraphrase, fill it with beautiful things, adorn it with beautiful things, and honor your skin as a castle, as a palace.
That's so the impetus of what it is, and if you can, yeah, right. Let's give her.
Pull that off. By the way, is it new as a Simone?
Yep. Yeah. And sorry for the online audience who couldn't hear that, but the idea is, the idea of the poem for Nina is we are all imprisoned in the castle of our skins. But if we use our castle if we decorate our castle, if we say, so be it, if we actually see our castle as a beautiful place that we can decorate ourselves, then we free ourselves from that imprisonment. And that's very much what masking is about. Sure, I don't know how much time we have. Let me know what we're doing with time. Okay. But Curtis, yes, please.
So, is your work available for purchase?
Yes, it is. Appreciate you, Curtis. Yes. Yes, Curtis asked, sorry, go ahead. Curtis asked if the work is available for sale. Yes, it is. On my website, danielcallahan.com, there is a shop where you can buy prints of the work. Yes.
So I'm thinking that there are board members of organizations that might want to purchase a piece for their offices.
It's done that right.
Yeah.
And I also said shout out Curtis because Curtis is the reason why I'm here. Curtis really made, yeah, right, let's give him a hand for that. And the reason why I met Curtis was Ash, so I'm very thankful to you both. But yeah, Curtis really advocated for me to be here, and so I really appreciate that. That further hits home the idea of I am because we are, because my success, the reason why I'm here is because of the people who surrounded me and are supporting me, and so definitely want to shout out Curtis, definitely want to shout out Sarah and the whole staff here at the Brattleboro Museum. This has been awesome from the installation all the way up to now. It's just been like really, really smooth sailing, and just I've always felt listened to and valued, and so definitely shout outs to you all and thank you for this opportunity.
I'm glad we got that on tape.
Yeah. Thumbs up. Yeah, sure.
Just one more question.
Okay. I'm down to keep going, but I don't know what people's schedules are like, so I'm sure we're over time, but.
It seems like an intense process. Have you ever had the experience of beginning to mask someone and not been able to complete it?
Oh, that's a good question. No, because I tell people beforehand that this is a long process, and to make sure that there's a certain amount of time that we've blocked off. I have had moments where I didn't record. I ended up not recording the mask, which is always a bummer, but that's okay. It's that makes it special. But no, I haven't had time run out, so to speak.
Or
Oh,
no,
sorry.
no, thanks.
We have a couple more.
Sure.
Do you look at faces, particularly any interesting ones, and wish to mask them?
Yes, all the time. So they asked, do you ever see faces or look at faces and wish to mask them, and all the time. It's funny, I tend to be a guarded person, and I tend to, when I'm out in the world, I tend to, sort of keep within myself. I'm sometimes a little shy, which can translate to being sort of standoffish. People may think I'm being standoffish when really I'm just being shy. But so I'm cognizant of staring at strangers. For everyone's safety, I try to be cognizant about that. But I do. I really love looking at faces, and I just find them fascinating. There's just so much there, whether the way that someone's eye tilts down, or the way the wrinkles, or the sort of the smile lines, or I got kind of into Chinese face reading. I just started researching it and just seeing how there's so many different kinds, and they have like a whole sort of organizational structure to these different sort of facial features and what they mean. And it's really interesting. Really just my fascination with it. But I think faces really do capture so much of somebody's experience that they're fascinating to look at.
Have you ever let anyone mask you?
Yes, I have. Again, when I was doing this in California, it was very much a communal activity. So people were always masking each other, and so thankfully I've had the experience of being on the other side.
So you don't feel like you own this, right? Like this is something. Do you wish people would just take this idea and start doing it in their community?
Yeah, because you're right.
Do you want to like trademark it?
Well, that's a good question, and no, because I feel like that would be kind of like I feel like it'd be kind of selfish. Because the only way I learned about this was because it's open source, because it's, and the idea is like, this, all you need is paint and a face. There's no way that anyone could trademark that, and while yes, this is my work, this is my creativity, but even so, 50% of it is somebody else's face. So I can't say that like, this is my work, this is our work, and that comes from the title of En Mask. It's a play, obviously, on en masse, where we do things as a group, and that's what makes this powerful.
It's just interesting as a working artist, you have to kind of look after your domain, your intellectual property.
You really do. Yeah. And now I have to do waivers and have people sign that when I work with them, and that's all kind of annoying, and it's unfortunate because we live in such a proprietary society, But I try to keep it as much to this is a communal ritual activity. It's for everyone. I ask that if you are going to approach it, to respect it. I tell people up front, this is not necessarily face painting. I don't want to change your expectation of what's happening here. Like, I don't take requests when I mask people. As long as I think people bring the same depth to it, they'll get out of it what I've gotten out of it. It's interesting with AI too.
Oh God, yeah.
But that's a whole nother conversation. Yeah.
Elementary question, not deep.
Okay.
In the design, who's selecting the colors? Is the person, being painted saying, okay, do what you want to do, but I got to paint yellow or whatever, or do you just get inspired by the color?
Yes. So the question was, who selects the colors? Is it me or is it the subject? It's always me, and I tell people up front I don't take requests. So it's yeah. So when to agree to do this is for you to be a canvas for an artist, and people are fine with that. Yeah. And if they want to pick their colors, then they can mask themselves. Totally cool. Yeah. Sure.
Kind of a variation on the question from a Zoom viewer. Was there ever an instance where either the person you were working with or yourself couldn't continue because maybe the person being unmasked couldn't go through the experience to completion, or if you were revealing something that you couldn't continue the process
of revealing? No, that hasn't happened. And that hasn't happened, but it would be interesting if that experience did happen. I don't know how that would be handled. I mean, we would stop, But the beauty of it is that, no one has to tell me anything they don't want to tell me, and I don't have to do anything I don't want to do, and I think both parties having that autonomy is really important to, creating a safe space, and so thankfully that hasn't had to happen. Yeah.
And maybe that's a real tribute to you in terms of creating that safe space, because you've described a couple of people who have been through very traumatic situations. So kudos to you.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's also too is that the reason why I say this is not necessarily a therapy is because a lot of people, the self-selection. I would never try to do this with somebody when they're still raw from an experience and they haven't come to a certain understanding. With Isabella, who was the activist, she had already been a spokesperson of her own story. So she owned that, she processed it, and she's able to talk about it. A lot of people aren't in that same space, and so I always have to be careful too in terms of how I enter this space, and that was primarily the reason why I started talking with psychologists, was to make sure that if something were to come up, that I at least knew, kind of how to proceed, me not being a therapist and me not being a psychologist. So, yeah, something I definitely take seriously. Yeah. There's more for Zoom. Okay, wow. Yes, sure.
This one asked if I were to embark on masking every day for a week or a month, do you have any advice for them?
Okay, the question is, if I embarked on a masking journey where I was going to do this every day for a week or a month, what would I suggest? And I would just suggest that you make sure there's enough time, that you give yourself enough time. And because a lot of the time is actually in the reflection. And yeah, it's very hard to find time in today's busy sort of age. And I think also a good amount of, I would say, healthy isolation is helpful. So, you know, all throughout that process, I wasn't sort of like on my phone. I'm like on my phone all the time. It's the worst. But I try to, you know, get away from the sort of deluge of information from outside in order to be able to start asking your own questions and start hearing your own voice. That was a big thing for me too. So being able to remove yourself somewhat from the hustle and bustle of life will help. But the practice will help one to do that as well. So I encourage it. And if you do that, you know, reach out. I'd love to hear about your process.
Number one, did you also take the photographs?
Yes, I did take the photographs. There's one piece, I believe, where I did not take the photograph. And that's, there's basically the one to the left of the information about the exhibition on that wall over there. That one was taken by somebody else. But I believe, and this one here, to the left of the two figures, obviously I didn't take that one because I'm in it. But the two figures side by side, I did not take that photo either. But all of the other ones, I did. Yeah.
And one more, what kind of paint do you use?
It's called Snazaroo paint. It's children's face paint. Yeah. It's water-based. It's non-caustic. It's good for the skin. Yeah. But the kind of paint is kind of not as important. All right. Thank you all. Thank you so much. Yeah.